Hey everyone, Rusty here for one more question. Welcome to our series called Access Your Agency. Access Your Agency is a series for agents and advisors who are now or soon will be operating in a new distribution system for life insurance specifically and for all financial services more broadly. A unified system where human agents and AI agents work together. We know AI can now handle a lot more data and it can run more of our business processes, what they call workflows today, and it can do it at much greater scale. What AI can't do is the discovery, advice, and advocacy that sets human advisors apart, and which traditionally has not scaled. These sessions aren't meant to be full training on a new system. What they are meant to do is clarify your role and mine in the new reality facing life insurance agents and all professional advisors. I think the best way to begin is by getting very clear about what our real value is in the marketplace. For a long time, agents like me have been told that our value comes from doing a whole bunch of things: prospecting, scheduling, opening cases, taking applications, underwriting, service, on and on. And that message didn't come from a bad intent, it just came from an older sales cycle. But in the age of AI, that framing no longer holds. So let's clarify something fundamental. Your value as a professional advisor is not many things. It's the one thing that remains when everything else can be delegated, or today, automated. And to discover what that one thing is, let's do a simple exercise. We used to call this the staff exercise. So imagine a successful advisor, experienced, very productive, generating a lot of revenue. And now imagine that advisor decides to start to delegate some of his activities. At first, it's the obvious things, right? Paperwork, data entry, illustrations, the behind-the-scenes operations. This used to require hiring more staff, and that's why we called it the staff exercise. And now imagine that the practice continues to grow, and so our advisor continues to expand the delegation, even to some client-facing work, scheduling, follow-up, routine service. But imagine that it continues, one activity at a time through staff or automation. Eventually, almost everything is delegated. So here's the question. What's the one activity that our advisor would still insist upon doing themselves? Friends, I've done this exercise 1,000 times, and the answer is always the same. It's fact-finding, discovery. And it's important to be clear about why. Because fact-finding is the essence of what an agent is. Take away fact-finding, and there's no need for an agent. And, if fact-finding were just a scripted survey, a checklist of questions of some kind, it would have been automated years ago. But we know that's not what fact-finding is. It's skillful conversation. It's conversation that adapts in real time to context, emotion, hesitation, to meaning. So this essential activity, the one thing that remains when everything else is delegated, is fact-finding. And while that's sinking in, it's worth asking. What is it that makes fact-finding so valuable? And why is it more essential today than ever? Well, let's start with this truth. As advisors, we deliver more of our value in the questions we ask than in the answers we give. This has always been true, and today, correct answers are more abundant than ever. They're cheap, and they're increasingly automated. But expert questions, those are still scarce. And they're valuable, and they're deeply human. Good questions surface what actually matters. They create clarity where there was confusion, and they cement trust with our client. That's why discovery is where value concentrates, not because information is hard to find, but because meaning is hard to uncover. And at its best, fact-finding is mutual discovery. The questions flow in both directions, not just revealing needs, but showing priorities. This is an interesting lesson that I learned, and probably many of you learned early in our careers, and that is that people only act on needs which they themselves discover, and preferably say out loud. So if as an advisor, I just tell clients what they need, they probably end up thinking about it forever. It's when they say what they need themselves that they tend to take action. That's why client questions drive good fact-finding as much as advisor questions. And in your best fact-finders, you know this. You felt it. Because there's a moment when the client's shoulders soften and the room kind of comes into focus, and they lean in and start asking us questions. And that's because they begin to see us as a trusted resource. Those moments are units of value in professional advisory. Everything else in the system exists to support that work. But here's the problem. Fact-finding, as it's traditionally practiced, has always been limited. And as a result, most of the value ends up being wasted. Now, I don't say this lightly. I just said the value created during great discovery conversation is real. In the moment, it can feel almost magical. But traditional fact-finding is limited in two frustrating ways. First, it's isolated. It's limited to the people in the room in the specific domain that you're discussing, life insurance or retirement planning or estate planning. And that discovery doesn't travel easily across domains, even though our clients' lives do. The second limitation in fact-finding is that it's static. It's captured as a point-in-time snapshot, a moment that immediately begins to age. And as our clients' lives change, that discovery has to be reviewed and updated and often re-entered. Because when the meeting ends, the value lives in the notes or the forms or the unreliable memories of the people who were in the meeting. And in most cases, it's never reused. This isn't a failure of advisors or even of our clients. It's a structural limitation of an outdated system, a system that was never designed to preserve, share, or build on discovery over time. In our new unified system of human agents and AI agents, this can change. We can overcome these limitations to fact-finding. But first, we need to make a mental shift. We need to redefine fact-finding as a process, not an event. Going forward, fact-finding is not a meeting or a step in the sales process. It's the whole process. It's all the questions that must be asked and answered by all the parties involved, client, agent, carrier, in order to make a coherent, mutual decision and then see it through to a policy. It's all the discovery, and it happens before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting, across time and across domains. And, the human advisor's role may not be to ask every question. Certainly, it's our role to ask expert questions, but it's also our job to surface the missing information and ensure complete discovery. And that will come from a coordinated human and AI effort. That's the future of distribution. So let's wrap up this session and return to our staff exercise where we began. In the past, delegation meant people, staff. Today, delegation increasingly means AI agents. But AI doesn't replace the human advisor. It operationalizes our discovery. It structures information. It eliminates data entry and re-entry. It removes administrative drag. What remains is exactly what our exercise predicted: questions, judgment, trust. A unified system of human agents and AI agents doesn't remove the human agent. It removes the time, money, and costs that have always limited us and ensures that we can scale. In the next session, we'll define scale more clearly, what it is, what it isn't, and how advisors actually achieve it in this new system. But if you leave this session with one thing, it's this: fact-finding isn't just your highest value activity. It's the entire process once everything else is removed. And it begins with one more question.